The UFC middleweight title will be contested at UFC 271, with the headlining matchup between the champion Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker widely seen as one of 2022's biggest fights. And given just how good these two fighters are, it's only natural that the MMA world are split down the middle on how they see it playing out. Will it be the striking mastery of the last stylebender, or the ever-improving well-roundedness of the Reaper? This is UFC Fighters Predict Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. Number 10. Daniel Cormier. Like many people, the former UFC two-division champion Daniel Cormier does not believe that we saw the best possible version of Robert Whittaker during this first clash with Israel Adesanya. In fact, DC seems to think that Whittaker was very much impaired by his own mentality coming in, whether that stemmed from general nerves or his animosity towards Adesanya. And it's an opinion that was shared by many who watched the usually dynamic and offensively tactical Whittaker reduced to a far more one-dimensional approach in the face of Stylebender's excellent defense. However, the 3 wins that Whittaker has been able to produce on his ongoing run of form have left little doubt in our minds that he's a much improved fighter from the guy who faltered in the face of Israel the first time around. And for his overall pick, Cormier seems to think that we'll be getting a better Whittaker this time around, and that his overall progression will be sufficient to make this a very different fight when compared with the last one.
I think it'll be much more competitive. I think Robert Whittaker took time away, and in the fights that he's had, shown improvement. I don't know how you improve when you're Robert Whittaker and you defended the belt so many times and you were the champion and you were all these great things, but you're still getting better. And he showed that in his last couple fights. I think there was some comfort in watching Adesanya fight against Kelvin Gastelum that was unwarranted. Seeing Gastelum have success in the areas that he did maybe gave Rob a false sense of what he could do. But you're not the next man. You know, you're your own man, and you have to fight in that way. I think Whittaker made some mistakes, and I don't think he'll do it again.
Number 9. Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith may have struggled to find consistent form within the 205-pound division, but when it comes to giving his takes on the going-ons in the MMA world, Lionheart has proven himself to be among the sharpest analysts in the game. And even though many people are giving Whittaker the benefit of the doubt when it comes to his underwhelming performance against Adesanya, Smith seems to be very much in awe of the reigning champion's striking prowess. And when it comes to the improvements that Whittaker may make, according to the former light heavyweight title challenger, it won't be enough to bridge that gap in technical striking that exists between the two. Smith is picking Adesanya's reign as the king of the middleweights to continue well into the year 2022. And though no one in their right mind would fully rule Whittaker out, Smith seems confident that the belt will be remaining with the former kickboxer.
If I had to put some money on it, I would put it on Izzy because I think that's the safe bet. But Robert Whittaker is a live dog for sure.
Number 8. Kelvin Gastelum. As a man who has been in there with both Stylebender and Whittaker for 5 rounds apiece, Kelvin Gastelum is a man who is in a unique position to comment on their upcoming clash for the middleweight strap. When he and Israel collided for the interim middleweight title a few years ago, the resulting fight was an absolute classic, a high-paced affair that saw both men have their fair share of moments. But it was Gastelum's defeat at the hands of Robert Whittaker that was truly the most definitive result of the two, the victory that earned the Reaper his upcoming shot at the middleweight belt. And given how recently he shared the octagon with the challenger, it's only natural that the talents of Whittaker are still fresh in his mind. And according to Kelvin, no fighter he has ever faced has made him aware of the levels that exist in this game more than Robert Whittaker, something that made him realize that he still has a lot of work to do on his game. High praise indeed from this top 10 185-pound contender.
So I was actually telling some guys at the gym the other day, it's like nobody's ever made me feel the way that Whittaker made me feel. You know, he was just kind of, he was operating on a different frequency, and nobody's ever made me feel that way. And kind of like I was outclassed, and you know, I was very impressed. You know. And not even Adesanya made me feel that way, you know. So I think if Whittaker fights the way that he fought against me back in April, you know, I think he's got all the opportunity to win that.
Number 7. Calvin Kattar. The Boston Navan Calvin Kattar managed to leave the MMA world in awe as he rebounded from a record-breaking beatdown at the hands of Max Holloway to look better than ever against the heavily favored Giga Chikadze. With his own reputation restored, and then some, Kattar can at least sit back and enjoy himself for a while as he heals up. And of course, with an eye on the collision of 2 of the best strikers in the game at UFC 271, Calvin seems to think that Izzy should have enough in his locker to get the job done. That said, like many of us, he expects that Robert Whittaker will show up in a big way this time around, or at least bring a greater level of conviction to the cage with him than he did for their first fight. Either way, it's pretty safe to say that we should all be prepared for some extremely high-level MMA, no matter how the fight plays out.
Man, I'm excited about that fight. I'm sure the Whittaker's going to come back and adjust from that last fight and have a lot of momentum. You know, I think he's definitely going to show up this time. But Adesanya is just, you know, a different breed, man. So I don't know if it ends differently, you know, but I think throughout the fight, the duration of the fight, it'll go differently, but I don't know if it'll be enough to get it done. I think I would say Adesanya, but I think Whittaker's coming with some heat.
Number 6, CANNONIER. Another man who sees their rematch as being a lot closer than their first fight is the middleweight contender CANNONIER. Now, the Killer Gorilla did, of course, spend 3 rounds in there with the former champion Whittaker at UFC 254, losing pretty comprehensively as he failed to match his opponent's technical ability. But CANNONIER remains a top 5 middleweight, and like his next opponent Derek Brunson, will be watching this matchup intently ahead of their own title eliminator down the line. Seeing the improvements in Whittaker's overall game has been enough to make Jared give him a much better shot at dethroning the champion this time around. But it did seem as though his admiration for Israel's surgical striking abilities shone through as he edged the middleweight king ahead of this official prediction. Unless the UFC, for whatever reason, decide to move ahead with an Adesanya vs. Whittaker trilogy bout, you do have to assume that CANNONIER is just one victory away from securing himself his first crack at UFC gold.
I don't want to say it's going to be the same because I feel that Robert Whittaker is an exceptional martial artist. I'm sure he's going to make the adjustments necessary to try to get his title back, you know, or at the very least make it a more competitive fight. That fight can go either way, you know. I like both of those guys. I like both of their styles. I think Izzy definitely has the style that will cater more to him winning. So he has a more tricky, a more elusive, a more cerebral style as far as striking goes, and that's scary to not know what you're going to get hit with when you get hit with it. So I'm interested to see how that's going to play out too.
Remember, if you're enjoying our content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Number 5, Strickland. You can always count on Strickland to deliver a truly hilarious take on any given fight. And with an eye on a showdown for the middleweight title, though the contender is full of praise for Israel Adesanya's striking talents, he makes a point of mentioning the odd lump that appeared on his chest prior to his showdown with Paulo Costa. With many fans and fighters alike openly wondering why the middleweight king appeared to have gyno, a condition associated with steroid use, Israel claimed that the lump has come about due to his marijuana usage. Strickland, on the other hand, made it clear that even if he admires Izzy's striking talents, his merits as an MMA fighter have an asterisk beside them due to him being a steroid user. If Strickland can make it to the top of the division and earn a fight with Stylebender, you'd have to suspect that this will be a pretty common subject of conversation, especially if they ever get together for a press conference. Only time will tell, I suppose.
I mean, Israel's just a crafty mother. Like, I don't get me wrong, like, we all know he does steroids, and that probably helps his performance. We all seen him fight with the titty that hung down. I mean, have you ever seen a man fight in the UFC with gyno from weed? I mean, look at Nate Diaz. If that was the case, Nate Diaz would have tits down to his knees. Get out of here with this. So anyways, back to him and Whittaker. Izzy's a great striker. You know, he comes from a steroid background of kickboxing. I think he's going to starch Whittaker because he's a great fighter, and that's the fight I want.
Number 4, Michael Bisping. It's easy to forget sometimes that Adesanya and Whittaker are both competing for Michael Bisping's old title. In fact, it was during the Bisping era that Whittaker made his initial rise from welterweight, eventually capturing interim gold, before being promoted to champion once George St. Pierre was forced to once again retire. Jump forward 5 years, and the 185-pound division is almost entirely different, filled from top to bottom with a range of new contenders. And you can just tell that Bisping is as excited as the rest of us to find out what the future of this weight class is going to look like. And though he doesn't exactly nail down his prediction per se, everything about his pre-fight analysis seems to suggest that he envisions a much closer fight this time around, backing Whittaker to show up in a big way and ask some serious questions of the champ. Simply put, these are the two best middleweights on the planet, and the count is just dying to see how their dynamic will work this time around, once the octagon doors have closed behind them. Thankfully, we do not have to wait for much longer.
Israel's going to be the favourite, but I'm really intrigued to see the odds. I don't know if they've released any yet, maybe it's too early, or I just haven't looked, but I think it's going to be pretty close. I think it's going to be pretty close, and Robert's going to be fired up. Okay, Robert knows this is his last chance, you know. He wants to be the champion. He wants to get that belt back. He wants that championship lifestyle. He wants to represent Australia.
Number 3, Derek Brunson. Up next is another man to have shared the cage with both Adesanya and Whittaker. In fact, Derek Brunson, who was a much wilder fighter in his earliest days, lost by way of first-round knockout to both of these guys. That's a pretty undesirable record right there. Of course, Brunson, with his new blonde hairstyle, has managed to find his way right into title contention, with him looking like a much better version of himself with each passing fight. And though he wasn't willing to discount Whittaker's chances at all, he seemed confident that Adesanya's striking mastery would be enough to stifle whatever Bobby Knuckles had for him. On top of that, consider just how tense things eventually got between Izzy and Brunson last time around. We're sure he'd relish a second chance at pulling off the upset.
That's a good question, you know. I can see Whittaker winning, but if I had to pick, I'd probably say Izzy repeats and wins it and keeps his title.
Number 2, Robert Whittaker. If there's one truly interesting pick on this list, it's the one turned in by the former champion Robert Whittaker. In contrast to the first fight, the Reaper seems to be a much calmer and cool-headed figure this time around, coming across as almost disinterested in the promotion of the bout. Where before he was clearly emotional about getting the win over the brash, new contender that was attempting to steal his title. This time, Whittaker seems to be focused on the bigger picture. When asked for a prediction on the fight, he said that this matchup was of no more or no less importance than any other in his pro career so far, and when he was pushed to give some indication of how the night might play out for him, he simply stated that he wants to show his improvements to their fullest, to make Adesanya feel every aspect of his skill set. And most importantly, he seems adamant that win, lose, or draw, the night would end with him enjoying a huge meal with his family.
People think because it's a title fight, I trained harder for this fight than usual. No, like that means I wasn't giving my all last camp. That's not how I work. I'm going into this fight with everything I have. Honestly, it's hard to say, but if I could visualize the fight, it'd be go in there and fill out the waters and just honestly just perform. I want to utilize my entire skill set. I want to make him feel uncomfortable. I want him to get confused because of how many weapons I'm throwing at him. And yeah, if I can, but of all of that, if I could just get in there and perform, know that I did my best and I managed to display my best, then I'll leave a happy man.
Number 1. Israel Adesanya. Despite Robert Whittaker's reputation as one of the nicest guys in the sport of mixed martial arts, he and Israel Adesanya have had something of a tense relationship over the years, with their insatiable competitive drive bringing up some real heat between them whenever they find themselves in the same room. And when Israel was asked about Whittaker as an opponent recently, he took aim at his insistence on bringing up the success that KELVIN GASTELUM and Jan Blachowicz were able to have against him, telling him to stop copying their work.
First time before, he was like, well, KELVIN has laid out the blueprint to the path of beating me, and yeah, look how that helped him. So this time, Jan, he thinks it has the blueprint on beating me. But I just say, like, he should write his own homework. Stop trying to copy everyone else's homework.
As for the fight itself, Izzy made it clear that he will be doing his best to test himself against Whittaker in each and every facet of the game, whether that be in the striking, in the clinch, or on the ground, determined to prove himself that he can be competitive no matter where the fight goes. It does seem as though the middleweight champ is hoping to make an almighty statement at the UFC 271 main event.
No, you have to learn all aspects of the game. That's why I humbled myself to learn jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and it's kind of like to be a good criminal, you should be a good lawyer. So that way you know both sides and how to play both. So yeah, I'm very well versed in this game, and I find it really stupid people think I'm not and think one thing got me to the dance. But I'm like, all right, keep that same energy. So yeah, I'm still learning. I'm just learning. I'm a white belt in everything.
And that will just about do it for this video. Who do you think will get their hand raised when the time comes for these two elite 185-pounders to face off? Do let us know in the comment section below. Again, if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.